Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of Mission Matters. This is our weekly show, 4 p.m. PST and 7 p.m. EST for all you listeners out there. Today's topic is the customer is always right. Is that outdated? And saying that I think a lot of folks that have lived by. And essentially, Mission Matters for all of you tuning in. This is the first time you're listening to us. We are a media platform focused on the needs of entrepreneurs, executives, experts. We amplify stories and we highlight the needs of entrepreneurs. And so essentially, we curate these discussions. We have a book publishing division. We published about 250 authors in a wide variety of books. We've also launched about 150 podcasts in a wide variety of industries as well. And we have a lot of our podcast hosts, our book authors that join us every single week. And today, every single week we host different discussions. And so today, the way that these discussions take place is Adam, my counterpart, more or less is the coordinator and asks a few questions, and we get everyone chiming in with their own questions and their inputs. And so with that, Adam, why don't you take the lead here and introduce all of our panelists?
All right. Sounds like a plan. And so we'll just, go around and everybody maybe spend 30 seconds or so just talking, just give your background, who you are and your company. And we'll start with ladies first and top right, maybe Joanna.
Hey, everyone. Thank you. So Joanna Pineda, CEO and Chief Troublemaker at Matrix Group International. We're a digital agency and we help organizations, basically increase customers, increase revenue, and we do it through web, mobile, social, and virtual events.
All right. Thank you, Joanna. And Jacquee.
Hello, my name is Jacquee Lee. I am the CEO of Silva Screen Printing. Silva Screen Printing is a direct-to-retail, high-volume screen print shop in Minneapolis. Typically, we service buyers groups, rep groups, people that want to sell direct into the retail market with their apparel printing, decoration, embroidery needs.
Thank you, Jacquee. And Matt. Good to see you.
Adam, you as well. So Matt Cook, I am the director of agency at Mission Matters, so I handle all things podcast.
And Jeff?
Hi, everyone. It's Jeff Norskog, director of publishing at Mission Matters. Nice to see some of my authors here today. Yeah, excited to be here. I think this is a fun topic. Sorry, I'm bouncing in and out. Twitter kicked me off and then let me back on. And yeah, working through the glitches in the matrix.
All good. Thank you, Jeff. All right. So first off, great to see everybody. And Joanna, I was thinking about this. I didn't even think about this earlier today when we were talking. And I'm like, did you pick this topic, customer journey, or were you on this one?
I wasn't, but I have to tell you, we have company fundamentals at Matrix. And do you know that one of them is the customer is not always right? It's actually a company fundamental.
Oh, this is going to be good. Yeah, I thought about it. I'm like, and for context for everybody that is listening, we did a 30, 40-minute interview, and Joanna, we went through pretty deep into some of the methodologies behind what her company does and the customer journey and how she's helping companies, solve the digital side of that and what that looks like. So I think let's just, you volunteered that the customer is not always right. So I didn't mean to pick on you for that, but can you give us a little bit more on that with Joanna? And then I'll just open up the floor to whoever else wants to jump in.
Yeah. So we have these company fundamentals, and I'll share with you a couple of fundamentals that kind of go hand in hand. One of them is the customer is not always right. The goal is for the client and the team to be in agreement on the solution. And basically, what we're saying there is that if it's kind of blind allegiance to the customer is always right, then I think what happens is staff feel undermined, right? They feel like, well, doesn't my opinion count? It's also the case that sometimes you just have clients who aren't very nice. And in that situation, I don't think they should be right. But the other thing is we have a company fundamental and that says, don't let your client make a mistake. So if you combine that with the clients is not always right, sometimes a client will say, hey, can we make our website orange and spin around? And that's not really what they should be doing. We actually train on what do you do when the client says, can you make my website orange and spin? So that they get what they need if it's not exactly what they want. And everyone's happy with the solution. So we actually train to this. This is really important because we do a lot of design work, which is very subjective. and we do a lot of custom development, again, very subjective. And so we have to bring our expertise and combine that with the client's requirements, and hopefully everybody is happy with the end result.
Anyone else want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll jump in. At Silva Screen Printing, we have something very similar. There absolutely is no methodology where the client is always right. We don't call it right or wrong. However, we make a statement that sometimes we are misaligned in our expectations. And that alignment is absolutely critical with the outcome. When we're talking manufacturing, oftentimes we are running long run production, 25,000 to 400,000 units. And there isn't a lot of room to make a mistake that the client isn't going to be happy with. So our goal is to always make sure that there is complete alignment prior to any sort of production or manufacturing process. And sometimes, regardless of how hard you try or whatever effort you make, sometimes that alignment just isn't achievable. And in that point, instead of saying the customer is wrong or they're not always right or anything to that perspective, what we address is sometimes we're not a good fit for each other. And we try and catch those way on the front end so that if we're not a good fit, it's not fair to our team to put them in a position where they're going to be dealing with customers who are crabby or customers who are difficult or expectations that are not realistically achievable through our process. And that's just what it is. Sometimes there's just not that alignment, and you want to pass on those customers early on so that there isn't a long process of trying to, make a square peg fit in a round hole. And it's just better to support your team with what their needs are and actually focus on the areas that you can align on.
Oh my God, do I love that alignment. Thank you. I'm going to borrow this.
Happy to help.
So I guess how do you communicate some of this stuff to clients? Like if especially in whether it's design, as you mentioned, Joanna, or Jackie, you're of course also in design when it comes to these screen printing things. Like how do we communicate that conversation or that dialogue, or is it intuitive, or like how does that happen? Because I think it has changed. I'm in agreement with you in terms of the customer being always right. Like, and I don't think it's based off of, I can't claim that I had some logic behind doing that. It's just like you can only do so much, right? And you're not going to be able to please everybody. That's just the way I've always thought. You can try, but you're going to not do a good job for some people then if you take on the wrong individuals. Like, how do people communicate that?
So what we say at Matrix is, it's not about saying to the client that you're wrong. So again, I'm going to give you the example. So we do design work. We'll present 3 designs. And first of all, we're never going to present designs that we are not happy if they picked any one of them, right? This happened to me a long time ago where the staff designer was like, oh, they picked the wrong one. And I said, what the heck? Like, you never present options that are going to be wrong. So that never happens anymore. That was 20 years ago. But, if a client says, hey, can you make this orange and spin around? The answer isn't no. What we do is we'll say, sure, we can make it orange and spin around. And to the best of our ability, we're going to show the client, and then we're going to say, but we have another idea that we think will better serve your needs, so that you don't end up in a situation where the client says, but I wanted it to be orange and spin, and you're saying no. And you're just going to get into a shouting match. You're going to say, but can I just see it? So what you want to do is you actually have to show it to them. And Jackie, you probably have done this. And then we'll say, look, this is what it is, but we don't think it's going to meet your needs. We actually have another idea, and it's going to be orange and not spin, as an example. And we find that works much, much better, because then the client feels respected, and you actually tried out their idea, and you're kind of bringing your expertise and showing them something better. Now, sometimes the client says, I want it to be orange and I want it to spin. And at some point, you just have to figure out where you're going to fight your battles.
I totally agree. I think what you mentioned is something that's so incredibly valuable: respect. And I think that when you work with clients and you are establishing a partnership with them, we don't have people that we consider customers. We have people that we're in partnership in business with because we want them to succeed, because then we look like rock stars. So this mutual level of respect has to be implied from the front end. We have expectations of what need to happen, and you have expectations, and speaking to the client, of what you need to have happen. And those expectations need to be, mutually beneficial. That way it's not an unbalanced relationship. The one thing that I will say that we have worked really hard at doing is being very transparent in the fact. And you mentioned the orange and spin around. We have customers that sometimes want us to put black ink on a black shirt. And our conversation with them is just point blank. Absolutely, we can put black ink on a black shirt. But what is your intention with this, message? Are you trying to make this subtle? Is this something that you don't want people to read? Are you intentionally hiding? If we understand their process, sometimes the answer to those questions are, yep, we want it to be incredibly subtle. And then that's a successful print. Sometimes they're like, well, no, we just like that look. Okay, people from 2 feet away aren't going to be able to see it. It has no marketing message. It's not going to be an effective measurement for you to validate against a message that's, say, white on black, because you've got contrast differences and those sorts of things. But the way that we approach that is we are experts in our field. And I come at it from the perspective of, I'm going to tell you what my experience is, and you can judge that however you choose and make a decision based on that knowledge base. Am I right? Absolutely not. There is no right or wrong. It's what I'm telling you is typical or atypical in the industry, or what I'm telling you will work or will not work for the garment, ink, color combination, the various threads that we can use. If I approach these things from the expert level and say, black ink on a black shirt isn't going to show, and here's why, and here's what we can do to make it show, or is that intentional? Then it's a very different, conversation. It's all about transparency and conversation and having, as Joanne mentioned, a mutual level of respect, in my opinion.
Oh my gosh, I love that black ink on a black shirt response. I'm thinking to myself with that question, do you want people to be able to read it, or do you want this to be more subtle? I'm like, that's positioning, Jackie.
Man, and you got to say that with a straight face too.
Yeah, I'm like, how do you do that?
There are times where it actually looks amazing. It just depends on what your intention is.
My creative director is really good at this. Sure, I can do that. What are you trying to accomplish? I see.
Right.
So
and
it's really
it's patronizing, but it's not. It's not.
It should never be patronizing.
Right. And that's not, that's not my intention ever. But sometimes you have to have a question that just is so painfully obvious that it's hard to, like you say, mention this question with a straight face. But that's part of this alignment. It's part of validating yourself as having a different knowledge base than your customers. And I think that's what makes us all experts in the field. Sometimes we have to juggle people because of that, and sometimes we get to experience things differently. And I think those are all valid valid intentions.
Yeah. I mean, hi, it's Jeff. I mean, it seems like we have, this theory of the customer always being right has been prevalent for so long that we've kind of have to retrain everyone to a new line of thinking. And it seems like that's part of the process we're going through, because you can extrapolate this, right? Is your boss always right? Because the answer to that would be yes, right? But it's actually a very similar paradigm. He's not always right. And when do you, whether it's a big client or your superior or, someone on your team, when do you stand up for what you think is the right approach? How do you approach it? How do you do it politically? And when do you lean forward and when do you lean back? Because there are going to be times when we're going to have to roll with decisions that we don't necessarily think are the best. And I think there's, a really big gray area that this topic, the more you guys talk about it, the more I'm starting to realize the nuance to it. And it's pretty exciting because it's empowerment, right? We're empowering our people. So it's like, I should be, taking the same approach to the people I'm managing as well.
But let me ask you guys a question.
So
let's think of like at Ritz-Carlton, right? They say that the customer is right, and, how they train their staff. I mean, in that situation, like, what's the right situation there? Is that different? Like with Jackie's team and my team, I've got a group of professionals who have been hired to perform a service for a client. And if you're at a Ritz-Carlton, you've got a group of professionals or, blue collar workers who've been, hired to do something. What's their place there as well?
Yeah,
Does the service sector, does the industry matter? I think it does potentially, but maybe it shouldn't.
Hey everyone, this is Chirag Sagar speaking for Mission Matters. Quick heads up, I did get feedback on this from a few folks who've listened to prior recordings. Always, if you guys can, always introduce yourselves, because people who are watching these recordings later on actually don't know who's speaking. I didn't realize that until I actually had two different people just email me this last week about that. So just a quick heads up on that. But I think to address that question, I think it is situational. I think it depends. I think like industries like tourism and hospitality, in many cases, you kind of have to bend towards the customer, because in an instant, they could give you a bad Yelp review. They could give you a bad travel advisor review, and it could completely tarnish your reputation. But if you look at industries like, if you're going to tech, if you're going into something that's more strategic, like a Steve Jobs, for example, or like an Elon Musk, in many cases, you're a visionary, right? And so you're creating things that haven't been done before. In those instances, the customer doesn't even really know what they want, because they don't know what they don't know, right? Like if you're creating something that's so brand new, that's revolutionary, you're doing something, you're designing something that's going to transform how they live and how they survive, or like whatever their necessities are that you're working on. I think it ultimately depends on the situation, and it really needs to come, it boils down to what it is that you're doing, the context of how they're going to perceive it, and what you're doing, and how it's appealing to the masses. Because on one hand, if you're looking at like mob mentality, there's a lot of aspects to this where things like mob mentality, your people, the masses are just following the masses. But on the flip side, if you're doing something, if you're trying to be the visionary, your job is to kind of stand out and not listen to the masses. But in industries like hospitality, I feel like you kind of have, like, you kind of need to. You're trained that way because you need to make sure people are feeling good, and that's it. It's like getting a massage, right? Like you want to make sure the person's happy at the end of it. Just jogging on
Yeah,
those.
I mean, just to jump in, this is Jeff Norskog from Mission Matters. I think both of you brought up a good point, and having been in kind of the consumer product sector and done some consulting there, especially from a new company perspective, and Chirag just alluded to it, the power of social media, the power of reviews. We were generally, afraid of negative reviews. So there is a scenario. The customer was literally always right. If anyone had a complaint, even if it was completely off base and even a hustle, I was like, okay, I'll refund everyone. Yes, thank you. So we would in some cases, lean all the way into that. And I think that's an interesting metric in today's world. The fact that anyone can tweet, can post, can in real time at companies with negative reviews. It holds companies to a higher standard, but it also gives customers, in some cases, way too much power. So if we're saying the customer isn't always right, how do we deal with their ability to weaponize, in some situations, their information?
This is Jackie from Silva Screen Printing. I think that you mentioned something that's absolutely critical, and that's that leverage aspect. And I also think I define right differently than valid. So the customer isn't always right, because sometimes their intentions aren't truthful or honest. And that's a very, like you mentioned, weaponizing their reviews or threatening. We had a customer that his wife came in and set up a design. She picked the garment. We went through a process. We don't normally service people at their level, but they were a new startup and we were trying to help them out. And it was a whole big involved thing. They received the garments that she had ordered, and her husband came in and screamed at the artist and said he took advantage of his wife, that she didn't understand the process, and we should have never done that. We should have never taken advantage of him. And I asked him politely to leave, and he proceeded to, him and all of his friends, just bombard our social media with horrible things. Well, I'm not going to be held hostage by somebody who isn't right or isn't moral or isn't just. And the problem is that by allowing those people to do that, then all you do is create more of this Karen kind of mentality in the world, and they have been empowered to the point that there's a scam culture with it, and there's a dishonesty with it. I'm going to be honest with somebody. If I make a mistake and I do something wrong, I am obligated to correct that customer's needs to the best of my ability, be that crediting, replacing, whatever it is I can do to correct it, because that's honest and moral business intention. If somebody tries to steal from me or tries to rip us off or tries to pull some sort of dishonest intention by stomping their feet the hardest or yelling the loudest, I'm just not going to play that game. I don't have time for it. I'm not interested in it. And they can do that all they want. I'm going to move on. And that means my reviews are going to be bad. So be it. The people who have done business with us will continue to do business with us. A review is not going to break us. I am not a, B2C provider. So I think I have a little more flexibility than a lot of people do. That leverage aspect is damaging to every industry, specifically service industries. And I think that people are doing a great disfavor to the world when they are empowering the cranky customers of the world, politely.
This is Matt from Mission Matters. And one of the great examples is recently there was a scam actually going on around fake reviews of high-end restaurants in San Francisco and New York City. So they were weaponizing Google reviews, and there's articles online about this and everything, but this happened actually earlier this month, and caught a lot of attention because they were asking the restaurants that they were leaving negative reviews on for $75 worth of Google Play gift cards. And so, to your point, this is something that shouldn't be acceptable. It's not something that people should be held hostage about. So, social media has a lot of great things because it also keeps in check bad businesses that don't really look out for the customer, right? However, on the other side of the spectrum, you have the mob mentality or even the reviews that get left that are just negative just so that they're harming that business or holding them hostage, like in the example with all of these Michelin starred restaurants. It's kind of crazy to think how it can be on both ends of the spectrum, right? So while it's not a mentality that the customer is always right, because sometimes the customer doesn't know what is actually right or what they actually should be doing, especially within creative.
Cool. I guess with that, we have our next week's conversation already teed up. So we'd love to have all of you guys join and any others that are out there that listen into this recording. Again, our next conversation is every Thursday, 4 p.m. PST. So we keep it consistent. Other than that, thank you everyone for joining here and for all those tuning in. I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody.